All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're about to get started here, and I just want to share that this is the presentation on making connections in an ever-changing environment. So hopefully you're in the right space. I'll give you a quick minute if you need to change or anything like that, but we'll get started here in just a quick minute. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our session today. I'm your moderator for this session. So I will be keeping an eye on the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to submit those in that Q&A. And I'm happy to introduce our speakers for this session. So this session is titled Making Connections in an Ever-Changing Environment, and we have our speakers from BYU, and they are Marilyn Richards, Carol Steppen, and Vika Filamoyatu from BYU. All right, and I'll hand it over to you, ladies.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today as we begin this Utah Advising Association virtual conference. My colleagues, Vika Filimoyatu, Carol Steppen, we are all employed as advisors at Brigham Young University, and we represent 3 different colleges and departments here on campus. During this presentation, we're going to share some examples of how advisors have helped facilitate connections for students, because together we have studied how authentic connections made outside of the classroom have led to student success. Now, brief caveat, the first examples we will share today were implemented and tested pre-COVID. As pre-pandemic connections became obsolete, it necessitated adaptations to satisfy the continued need for authentic connections for students. Allow me to introduce ourselves. I mentioned that although we are advisors from BYU, we represent different departments and colleges. Vika manages all aspects of student advisement for the honors program. She works directly with students to complete honors requirements, including the thesis. She advises Honors Student Leadership Council and teaches the student leadership class in the honors introductory course. I advise students declared as open major, as well as students who want to explore new majors. I teach a career exploration course developed to help students explore themselves, majors, and careers. And I serve additionally as an advisor for the Non-Traditional Students Association. I formerly managed student advisement at the BYU Salt Lake Center. And Carol provides advisement in the life sciences department for biology, exercise and wellness, exercise science, public health, health science, and the PD Bio majors. She also advises the Life Science Student Council. And before life sciences, she also advised students at the BYU Salt Lake Center. While we're here together today, we're going to cover the definitions of connection and student success to put it in context for this presentation. We'll talk about the connection challenges pre and post-COVID, or obstacles that have posed threats to authentic connections, and talk about implementations, results, and the results. So we'll share implementations that we put into place to facilitate connections, and then the results of those implementations. And last, we'll cover the adaptations that we've had to make. Because blindsided by COVID-19, we've had to continue to facilitate connections. So we're going to share what we've heard from other advisors, what we've seen in our own community, and then we're going to have an opportunity to hear what you have done to help facilitate student connections.
I have a lot of memories from when I was a child. One that's always stuck out to me, though, was when I was about 10 years old and I was in school and I struggled. And I didn't struggle with English, math, or science. I struggled holding still. And I would try to listen and focus and process ideas, but I couldn't help myself. And to be honest, I would sit there and then I would just start tapping. And the students in the class would look at me and they'd say, "Hey, stop tapping." A lot of the time, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then eventually even the teachers got after me and they would yell at me and they'd say, "Clint, you have to stop tapping." It got so bad that I got sent to the principal's office for tapping. And he said to me, "Okay, maybe when you go back to class, just try sitting on your hands." So I did. I went back to class, and when I felt myself starting to tap, I did this. I sat on my hands. And that worked for about 5 seconds. One time I was tapping in class, and my teacher, Mr. Jensen, he looked at me and he yelled. And he said, "Clint, stay after class." And I thought to myself, this is it. Like, I am done. Now, I've always been the type of person that believes that a single moment in time can change a person's life. And this was one of those moments for me, and I will never forget it. And so I was sitting there with Mr. Jensen and an empty classroom. And he walked past me and he sat next to his desk and he said, "Clint, come here. I want to talk to you." And as he looked me right in the eye, he said, "No, I need you to know something. You're not in trouble. But I do have just one question that I have to ask you." And he asked, he said, "Have you ever thought about playing the drums?" And in that moment, Mr. Jensen, he leaned back and he opened the top drawer of his desk. And he reached in and he pulled out my very first pair of drumsticks. And he held them in his hands and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Clint, you're not a problem. I think you're a drummer." From that moment on, I've never put those sticks down. I've toured, recorded, and played drums all over the world. My whole college education was paid for with drumsticks in my hand. Just because of a single moment in time when somebody believed in me and he saw something in me that I didn't even see within myself. And from that moment, I learned that there's a difference between being the best in the world and being the best for the world.
So let's chat for a minute and use your chat. Actually, let's talk about how we can be the Mr. Jensens in our students' lives. What measures do we see that show us what a student's potential is? And what resources do we have to help them make connections that can have a lasting effect? Just as Clint said, that one moment in time that changed his life. So go ahead and put into chat what you believe we as advisors can do to help be that connection, help our students see their potential. Many times advisors are called teachers, so I know you've had opportunities like this. And I'm not seeing any response. Okay, well, let's think about how, let's think about that as we go through our presentation here, how you might be able to be that person. Okay, so defining connection and student success is ambiguous at best. So to give context for the presentation today, we'll use definitions from both Rovai and Koo. Rovai found that connectedness is the feeling of belonging and acceptance and the creation of bonding relations. In terms of student success, we learned from Koo that the amount of time and energy students put forth for student engagement is positively linked with the desired outcomes of undergraduate education. Describing the results of his Harvard study about student learning, Professor Richard J. Light shared the following. He assumed that the most important and memorable academic learning goes on inside the classroom, while outside activities provided a modest supplement. What he found was exactly the opposite. The evidence showed that when students were asked to think of a specific critical incident or moment that had changed them profoundly, 4/5 of them chose a situation or event outside of the classroom. So how do we help facilitate connection then outside of the classroom, if in fact that is where the best learning takes place? In 2019, David Brooks, who is a New York Times columnist and author, spoke at a BYU forum, and he stated there are a lot of people who are very lonely, very isolated, and very afraid. Since the pandemic, we've even seen this loneliness and isolation augmented. He says there is one skill at the center of any classroom, the ability to see someone else deeply, to know another person profoundly, and to make them feel heard and understood. He suggests that we can combat this isolation and fear and develop a sense of community as we work together on a great common project. Advisors have the potential to see students deeply and influence and facilitate connections that can have lasting effects on their undergraduate experience. Carol and Vika will relate experiences that show the impact of connection or lack thereof from the BYU Salt Lake Center, which is an extension of BYU located in Salt Lake City, and the BYU Honors Program, which is a robust and challenging experience for motivated undergraduates at BYU. As they share, look for ways that show how advisors facilitated authentic connections that helped lead to successful undergraduate experiences and far-reaching effects beyond college. Carol will share first.
Thanks, Marilyn. As advisors, it may be challenging to help students find meaningful and lasting connections that will ultimately lead to student success. In researching what may facilitate student success, we found that the quality of students' undergraduate experience was related to students' level of involvement in campus life. Students who attended co-curricular programs had significantly higher GPAs, about 0.25 points on a 4.0 GPA scale, in contrast to their cohort peers who attended fewer co-curricular programs. Aston's research found that more than any other environmental measure, student community has direct effects on student satisfaction. Also, that peer interaction has great effects on nearly all areas of student learning and development. Based on this research, the Salt Lake Center advisors had concerns that there were no student clubs or organizations for students to become involved. The Salt Lake Center is comparable to a commuter school where students come to attend class and then leave with no opportunity to participate in co-curricular activities. Commuter students often struggle with making meaningful connections with other peers compared to their counterparts who live on campus. Having connection to and involvement with the institution can lead to student success. To assess our student population, we started with a focus group to learn what students would like to see at the Salt Lake Center. The #1 result of the focus group was that students wanted to feel involved. They also wanted to create a sense of culture, a culture of service and friendliness, and they wanted opportunities to build their character through service and leadership. A Qualtrics survey was sent to the Salt Lake Center students to assess their level of connection with others at the Extension campus. We were expecting them to say that they didn't feel connected. However, we were surprised to find that the majority of the students did feel connected in the classroom, but there was very little interaction outside of the classroom, and therefore very little connection with others outside of class. Our focus group group then became our first student council at the Salt Lake Center. The students we received, the results that we received from our survey were different than what we anticipated, and it guided us on our course of action. So I'd like to ask you, how are you assessing student needs, and what have you done as a result? What have you done after you have gathered the information and put that into action? Go ahead and put that into chat, and we will see if other people have been doing things that can help us learn from each other as far as assessment and implication of what we're finding. And I'll point out as you're thinking and typing that Marilyn also mentioned from Dr. Richard Light that when he started to assess the most meaningful experiences, he was surprised at his results. So, I think sometimes we do the research thinking we're going to find one thing and we end up actually finding another. Okay, let's see. Someone has mentioned that they do polls and questionnaires, and then they make referrals or personal connections with resources. So questionnaires and polls, those are great ways. And then actually creating the connections with the resources, very important. Okay, send out surveys to students after their appointments with the advisors. Okay, that's another great way to assess how you're doing and what the students are perceiving from the appointments. Okay, if anyone else submits anything, we'll go ahead and publish that to the chat. But we'll go ahead and move on. As advisors, we mentored the student council as they developed a service program to facilitate student engagement with their peers. We set up tables with fleece to tie quilts for the primary children's hospital. Our next service was making mats for the homeless out of plastic bags. Students may not have a lot of monetary funds, but when we asked for donations for the plastic grocery bags, we got an overwhelming response. I guess students tend to collect these plastic grocery bags in their apartments, so they were more than happy to donate the bags that we used for making the mats. The important or the notable results were the student connections and the involvement that occurred, not the number of blankets or the mats that were made. Students commented that this was an amazing idea. There should always be something that the students could participate in while waiting for classes and for the train. Another said, the center isn't just a place to take classes and go home. Another comment was that it's been fun and nice to see people outside of class. So we felt that we were successful in starting initial connections and with plans to progress the service projects going forward. Now Vika will share what their honors program did to promote connections and increase student success.
Thank you, Carol. In the honors program, we found that we had two problems as we did some assessment and looking into our data. One of that problem is high attrition. We found that many students joined the honors program, but only about 25% graduated from the program. And number two problem that we had is we had limited resources like every other campus. We were concerned with our limited resources and pouring in more and not producing any favorable result. With those problems in mind, with the high attrition, we wanted to find out, number one, why students were leaving the honors program. And number two, what stage of the honors program students were leaving. So we first look at the data that we already had on these students. We sent out student survey. One of you guys mentioned earlier that you utilize student survey. We use Qualtrics software and send that out to our students. We also invited students to come in, students that had left the program to come in for a student focus group, and to incentivize them to come back. We fed them lunches and we gave them treats. We also invited honors faculty that have been involved in the honors program and honors coordinators from different departments on campus, and form a focus group. The results were surprising. We found out that most of the students that had left the program was because they did not complete the honors thesis. And so we look, and as we did the focus group with the students, we found out the reason why they left is they just did not have enough time to do the honors program. Another one was the resources. They indicated in our focus group and in the survey that there weren't any resources to help them complete. They were lost. There wasn't anything that connected them to their disciplines. The project itself was independent of what they were studying and were interested in. There wasn't a structure. There wasn't a class with that requires them to take in order to assist them in doing the honors thesis. There was a mismatch between the students and the faculty advisor, the faculty that's supposed to mentor them in the program. And from our faculty meetings, focus group, we found that there wasn't enough connections and interaction between the faculty and the student. And so with these things that we found from our different meetings, we went to work. From the advisement, the honors advisement, we started to offer thesis workshops. And in these thesis workshops, we would attack different topics, such as how to find a thesis topic, how to form a mentorship committee to help assist the students. We talked about different things like publishing, how to publish their thesis. We also invited other students who have done the thesis proposal, that have done it, to come in and mentor students. We would match them according to their majors and allow the students to form different connections. Thesis course, in our thesis course, we improved dramatically, where we would require students to submit a plan of how they would spend their time, how would they work on their thesis, and what process would they go through to produce or to complete the thesis. We also had a middle of the semester check-in where they had to come in and talk to an advisor to see how they were doing, how was their thesis coming along. And at the end of the course, they would do a little written report and submit that to the advisement so that we see the progress. We had some honors events that we had to adapt and to kind of change, where we would focus on a student connection. We would have, for example, we had chocolate chat every week, every Friday, as an informal kind of meeting where we have a faculty and a group of students kind of eat lunch together and kind of talk about projects. It was mostly lecture based, but we had to change that and allow it to be personal, where students are meeting faculty and talking about the different projects that they have. Again, forcing that connection. We also had to do some our commitment interview, one of the interviews that students have to do to be a part of the honors program. We had to require or highly recommended students that they meet with faculty earlier on instead of waiting till the last minute to talk to faculty about their thesis. And from the faculty side, we realized that faculty reported that they just didn't know how to work with undergraduate students. They're used to working with master's students and how to work through those master theses, but they were limited in their knowledge of working with undergrad students. And so we had to do some little training to our new faculty and our new honors coordinator in kind of recommending and sharing tips on how to connect with students in their level. The end of those meetings, we hand out a simple handbook to our faculty, again, that would discuss some of those key elements of how to work with undergraduate students. It would also have some expectations on deadlines and things like that. Before every fall semesters, our directors would do a faculty meeting before the fall semester, and one of the agenda items there was how to engage with students. And so that was also pushed from the administration. We had an introduction course that was introduced into the program, and we would invite faculty as guests to come in, and they would talk about how to connect with faculty, how to do thesis in different disciplines. At the end of those meetings, we have feedbacks from students how, oh, now I know how to work, how to find thesis topic in life science and how to do them in humanities. Oh, now I have a face with the program, right? I have some connection with these faculty in different areas on campus. And it makes it easier and not intimidating for sophomore or even junior students to walk into a faculty office and talk to them. So we started this in 2018. All of these changes and the efforts to foster the connections between students and faculty and between students and advisors. And here are some of the results. There were two results that we were interested in. One, we increased our graduation rate. And then it came down, as you realize, any changes you make, it kind of, the result doesn't happen right away, right? And so just from this chart, we had an increase in completed thesis, and that leads to an increase on our graduation rate. And so that was exciting for us. And then the pandemic hits. We had to do some adaptations to the things that we were doing to foster those connections with the students. Our student events was shifted. They were all shifted to virtual student events. One of my favorites was having our Student Honors Leadership Council put together a game night as part of our social gathering before fall semester. And each of those in the event, they created a breakout rooms, and each of the breakout rooms had like a different game. And I learned how to play imposter. Smash Bros was one of them. And so it was a lot of students like that, a chance to interact even if it was virtual. We also started an ambassadorship program where each of our honors courses had a class representatives, where they were in charge of creating those student connections. They had a little budget that were given to them that they could buy some treats, right? And put them in a basket and pass them around the class if it was a face-to-face class. They were in charge of posting some uplifting messages on the social media or even in their learning suites for each of the classes. And so that we received positive feedbacks from students that even though it was virtual, but they were creating some connections with other students. They got to know their faculty and other students in the class. Advisement, like everyone else, has shifted. We utilize Google Voice for our phone conversations and Zoom for our face-to-face meetings. Social media was heavily utilized in this past year, where we would run different campaigns. We had a mental health week, awareness week, where we would post uplifting messages, and we would ask students to repost them, like them, for a chance to win some prizes. That's how we incentivize people connecting and reposting our posts. Now I'm going to turn the time to Carol.
Thanks, Vika. And As Vika said, it is much harder now to make the connections on campus. If students aren't on campus and we're not on campus, or even if we are and we can't have events. So here are a few things that we have seen on our campus here at BYU. Advisors that are still holding walk-in hours, only they're doing them on Zoom, where they open up their Zoom for certain hours during the day where students can just come into the waiting room and come in and just ask their brief questions. Also, the workshops and webinars that are being held virtually have higher attendance than they ever did when they were in person on campus. So that's another benefit to doing things virtually. Clubs and socials and other activities are being held over Zoom with, as Vika mentioned, games or Kahoot games to encourage some interaction and some fun. There's an office on our campus that did video introductions of each of the advisors for the virtual new student orientation. And each advisor recorded videos of who they are and a little bit about themselves, as well as the majors that they advise. And then they posted those on their website. They also created separate chat rooms where they were able to answer questions that students might have. And it ended up working out quite well. There's also increased activity on social media with videos being made of various professors in the colleges to introduce themselves and their research to the students. That's something we did here in the College of Life Sciences. But I've also noticed an increase of activity through the different social media outlets for different organizations on campus as well. And then Marilyn is going to talk a little bit more about other campuses.
Thanks, Carol. The pandemic certainly has taught us that because of the limits to physical connections between faculty, students, and their peers, and others, that there is a great need for advisors to help facilitate connections. And you've given some great examples, Carol, lest you think those who are attending think I've ignored you. I just wasn't able to see the chat, and now I have, and you've had some really great suggestions. Clint says he likes to see, help students see challenges as opportunities, encouraging high expectations, looking at students' strengths creatively, excuse me. And Noah from WSU says, I always get to know what my students enjoy and help them realize opportunities to explore those at Weber in ways they didn't know about. So thank you so much for sharing those. Forgive me for not seeing them earlier, but I attended a webinar a few months ago after, these adaptations had to be made, and there were some ideas from advisors throughout the country that I thought were really noteworthy here. Some advisors started to use Padlet, which is a medium that can be used by students and advisors to post notes on a common page. And the notes posted by advisors and students can contain links, videos, images, and document files. So a really cool way to be able to share things with one another. One group of advisors met with students. Now they did it social distance. They set it up at a time they could all gather, those that were near campus. And they said they did this to ask the experts or the students what they needed. And this resulted in a series of short informational videos in response to those needs that were made available to students on their campus. One advisor created a video message using her phone to ask students how they were doing as an individual. She was very sincere and genuine and invited them to meet and connect with her. Additionally, outreach emails went to 8,000 students just to see, express concern with what's going on with the pandemic and how they were responding, what their challenges were, and then again, inviting them to come in and meet with an advisor. So I'll keep an eye now on the Q&A, but I want you to think about what you're doing in your office. We've had an opportunity now to hear what some others on our campus are doing and many across the United States. But what are you here in the state of Utah? What are you doing to help your students feel connected, especially right now? Tell us what challenges you might have seen, but what are you doing to help facilitate student success by helping them connect in a meaningful way? Let's see. I try to connect students with faculty members doing research along the lines of their interests. That is similar to what they did in the honors program. That was really, really successful. Somebody asked, they'd like to know how to make mats out of the grocery bags. Carol, thanks for responding. So what are some of the things that you have done in your offices that have been unique, right? You can't gather the students together. They can't gather in other activities on campus. But how can you help facilitate? Think of the story, the video we watched with Mr. Jensen and how he helped Clint see the potential inside of him, gave him his own set of drumsticks, right? That changed his life forever. And what did he say? That this moment, it created a moment for him that impacted him forever. Okay, we're kind of quiet on the chat line. So I go ahead and advance to the next slide. I wanted to show you that we, go ahead to the next slide. Here's a list of our references that we have used in our studies and specifically used here in this presentation, and this will be available, as I understand it, after the conference is over. Here's our contact page and information. You can reach, like I said, we're all at BYU. And I just wanted to ask if there were any questions that were raised for you today that we could now address for you. Any questions you had about the research? Any questions you may have had about the approach that we took to try to implement change or connections for our students? Okay. Clint says, our student council sent handwritten notes with positive messages to students. That's awesome, Clint. Thank you. What a great way to help them serve others. That Dr. Schramm talked about that in our keynote earlier too, how important it is that as we serve others, that enhances our experience. Hold feedback sessions for students to talk about how courses are going and express their concerns and the support they need. Excellent idea. Spend time in training our student advisors with more social interactions. What a great idea, right? Sometimes this doesn't come naturally, right? But learning how to interact is a great thing. Okay. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate the opportunity we've had to be with you today. We have learned as advisors that we do have the capacity to be great facilitators for helping student success through helping to connect students in a meaningful way, right? Just like Mr. Jensen, we can help create that single moment in time for our students, and that will make all the difference for them. We certainly appreciate you being with us today, and feel free to reach out to us at any time if we can answer any questions. Thank you.